Go. All right, guys. All right, so I don't know if I'm necessarily here to sell you on this idea, but I'm definitely here to share some of my experiences and some of the stuff that I have learned along the way. Okay, so first and foremost, for my lawyer's perspective, I put this disclaimer up there because in the state of Michigan, or actually in the country, you need to be a registered dietitian to actually prescribe diets, and I don't do that. I coach and help people with diets. Okay, so, and like I said, I don't know if I'm necessarily here to sell you on this concept of keto paleo, as much as I am here to share some information on what I've experienced along the way with me personally, as well as my clients and people that I've helped. I actually own PFP Fitness and Training Center in Howell, Michigan, and we've helped a lot of people reverse a lot of metabolic diseases. We've helped a lot of people increase their performance, and we've even helped some people with some fat loss, which ends up being a side effect after you weigh out all the positive benefits of some of the stuff that we've found along the way, okay? And I think you'll ultimately, if you can adhere to this lifestyle for a little while, you'll recognize the same thing too. So I usually talk for 2 hours on this, and I have to have someone reel me in on that. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to just spill a bunch of information out for about an hour, okay? So I'm going to cut my presentation a little short. But that being said, I want to focus on areas that you might be interested. So let's ask a couple questions. Who here is mainly here for performance? Anyone here want to help their performance? Anybody else? Okay, so anyone mainly here for maybe optimal health, reversing metabolic disease, anything along that nature, diabetes and some of the other things? Good, that's really good. Anyone here specifically for looking fat loss? Maybe trying to lose a few pounds kind of thing. Okay, good. Good. All that stuff that I have found along the way has been our experience with doing a keto paleo diet. So how many people are currently members at First Generation CrossFit? Okay. Ballpark, how long have you guys been doing CrossFit? Just yell out some numbers. 5, 6 years. So in the CrossFit community, the paleo thing is very popular, right? They talk about a style of paleo eating, which is more of a hunter-gatherer style of eating. And at this point in the game, from where I started, there is about 50 shades of paleo. Okay, everybody has a version of paleo that fits their needs. Okay, so the reality is that the hunter-gatherer grocery list was really limited. And a lot of things started popping up along the way that are more what I would say paleo-friendly than actually paleo or a hunter-gatherer grocery list. Because let's face it, you can't really mimic that diet unless you got up every morning and you were literally hunting and gathering. And there's a lot of things that just aren't there. And not to mention that we weren't this far north. And not to mention that a lot of things have died off. And not to mention that a lot of stuff was seasonal. Okay, so you can really take it to that, you know, level 1, 2, 3 paleo, or you can find something that works for you. And it's really how I started in this whole thing. Okay, so I wasn't that guy. Okay, I was not that paleo guy. I started this as a 250-pound power lifter who was on what I referred to as commonly referred to as the GFH diet, which was get effing huge. Okay, so I ate anything and everything in sight because I was doing powerlifting actually since high school. I've been a competitive powerlifter for over 25 years now, and bigger was stronger, right? So that was the mentality. And around the early 1990s, Elite Fitness came onto the scene. Dave Tate, Jim Wendler, all these guys were just like, eat as much as you can, get as big as you possibly can. Louis Simmons out of Westside Barbell, he's kind of made his way into the CrossFit world. He was kind of the same mentality too. Bigger is better. So I want to paint this picture that I was not this guy, and I really still am not, and we'll talk more about that. I was just the shop vac, okay, 250-pound shop. We all went to breakfast after the bar. I was finishing everything you didn't eat, okay? Everything, and if I was eating lunch, it was whatever I had a coupon for on Fast Food Alley. Not that guy, okay? So, right around the time my daughter was born, I started taking a good hard look at my mortality and my health. And I decided that maybe bigger wasn't better. Maybe that was doing my mortality no favors. So I started looking closer, well, first of all, at my weight, because there was this idea in my head that correlated with optimal health, that skinny was healthy. And that's not necessarily true, because there's TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And I started looking at these things closer, and once during a routine physical, my doctor looked at me and said, Jamie, there's a direct correlation between belly fat and heart disease. And I'm like, who's he talking to? I'm this great big strong power lifter. I don't got nothing to worry about, drug-free, but I eat like a horse, blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of the tipping point for me, was my kids, my daughter. So, and then I had made some comments in the gym that I was like, hey, you know what, I'm thinking about leaning back out. I'll go back to this guy here on your guys' left. I was leaning back out and say, I'm going to get my six-pack back. And I just met with roars of laughter. So I was kind of like, oh, God, how far has it really gone? How bad is this really? And I started looking and thinking and doing more things. And a friend of mine recommended a book called Neanderthin. Okay, and that was kind of the first book on the scene for this whole paleo thing, which you guys probably have had some exposure with. And he basically presented me with the idea that a hunter-gatherer lifestyle was how we evolved to eat. And that's kind of where I learned the basics of all this. And it kind of made sense to me. I said, well, if I'm not, maybe it's not the silver bullet, but maybe it's a good place to start. Okay, if we didn't eat all this bad food in the Neolithic, if we didn't have all this food in the Paleolithic era, and it wasn't to the Neolithic era when we started farming and producing grains and eating dairy and stuff like that all these health issues started popping up, maybe I should take a closer look at it. Then I started reading more and started experimenting more, and like I mentioned, the 50 Shades of Paleo, where are you at in this journey? Okay, I started leaning into it. And when I started leaning into it, I started noticing health advantages. So I've had asthma since I was a little kid. Used to have asthma since I was a little kid. That started subsiding. The arthritis in my knuckles started subsiding. I would literally tap my knuckle on something in the morning. I'd feel like lightning bolt going up my arm. And that went away. Okay? My belly started to rescend. Okay, and that started, as farther I got down that paleo pathway, started to get thinner and thinner and thinner, and I started to feel better and better and better. Had a hard time with that being a big power lifter, is because smaller also meant weaker. And I started to discover that in fact wasn't the case. What in fact was the case was that I had less systemic inflammation eating that way. So my recovery was better. My breathing was better, less autoimmune responses occurring. Started getting rid of the grains and the dairy, so I started, my guts were most likely healing up. I can't say for sure because I hadn't anything done intestinally to measure that, but I'm assuming I had some major leaky gut at the time because I was a breadstick, pizza-eating mofo at the time. So all these positive effects started coming. I was like, there is something to this. So I decided to hit it hardcore and leaned into it with just breakfast in the beginning. Okay, so it was eggs, bacon, and a bowl of fruit. That was pretty easy, right? And then I do outside sales for a living, so I professionally take people to lunch all day. So I figured, well, I'll go breakfast, dinner, and find my way to work lunches, and I did. And then, like I said, all of a sudden I noticed my asthma went away. One morning, damp morning, on my treadmill in my basement, I gunned that thing up to about 9.5 miles an hour and stood on it as long as I could and could not give myself an asthma attack anymore. Okay, so that was my experience with paleo. From a performance standpoint, as I said, I became a sponge for this stuff. I started reading. Actually, let me back up a step. I'm not just the gym guy, too. I actually have a biology degree and medical technology degree from the University of Michigan. Even though I'm not a registered dietitian, I am a biologist by their definition. So that's kind of was my science background on this. So as I started reading, a lot of these mechanisms that I learned from college started to make sense. High carb diet versus, high fat diet versus high protein diet, all this kind of stuff. All the chemistry started to make sense because I remember in my cell biology class that my professor telling me that it's very hard for your body to convert fat to energy. It's very easy for your body to convert sugar to an energy and store it. So a lot of these things started circling around for me. Okay, so real quick, for those of you that aren't very well versed in both these two things, paleo diet versus a ketogenic diet. Paleo diet, think of as the grocery list. Everything that we evolved eating as a species. So if you pictured yourself buck naked on the savannas of Africa with a stick and a rock, what could you eat? Okay. A ketogenic diet is not necessarily a paleo diet. A ketogenic diet is you manipulating your macros, which is your protein, carbohydrate, and fats, the things that you find on the back of a nutrition label, to the point where you lower your carbohydrate intake low enough that your body stops burning glucose as its main energy source and goes to burning fat as your main energy source, be it dietary or your own. Okay? Just wanted to get that out there because I've had that made comment a couple of times before. What's the difference between this paleo, ketogenic? Two different ideologies that I put together. All right? Okay, I'm sorry. We just talked about what is the paleo diet. It's a natural human diet, anything that we could gather. And like I said, for those of you that have been in the CrossFit world for a long time, meat, fruit, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. No processed foods like dairy, no legumes, no grains, no tubers, no potatoes, which is sometimes that gray area in the paleo world. Oh, some people say I can have a sweet potato or a yam. Some people say I can't. And we'll talk about why you can't. Benefits of paleo, we just talked about this. Less inflammation, better blood profile, weight loss, faster recovery, which actually I found out is not actually faster recovery, it's less oxidative stress. And when you put yourself in a state of nutritional ketosis, that's going to actually rear its head even more for you. Okay, and we'll talk about that once we get a little closer to that. And I'm going to breeze through some of this grain stuff because I think a lot of you are well versed already in the paleo from the people that raised their hands. So here's trouble with grains. It's a processed food, right? It was one of man's first processed food. The Egyptians who controlled the grains back in their reign of error kind of pretty much controlled the world. That's why Rome had such an interest in Egypt at the time. But it was it's one of our first processed food, and it's one of our first simplified carbohydrate. It's one of the ones that you heat and mill actually to eat. Okay, it's not often that you can walk through a wheat field, grab a stalk of wheat, and eat it and go, tasty. It's something that we heat, something that we milled. Nowadays, it's something that we add butter and salt to. And the reason we add butter and salt to it is because it adds to that primary craving for fat. A lot of times you notice that. A lot of times that's why donuts taste so good, right? Jelly donut. It tastes like our primal craving for fruit. Breadsticks taste so good. It's salted and buttered, our primal craving for fat. We talk a lot of times, people say, like, well, where do you get your vitamins from if you don't have grains? Here's a little chart that I found that, I don't know if you guys can read that, I usually hand that out, but it'll actually show you, unless it's a fortified bread, which means they added a vitamin to it, there's really not too much that grains offer. Actually, they kind of started throwing that in there in the late 70s, early 80s, fortified grains started coming on the scene is because we are so vitamin deficient, because we were eating so many grains instead of eating our natural human diet. So instead of correcting the problem, they just added a vitamin to it, kind of thing. We'll just briefly go over some of the anti-nutrients here. Lectins, phytates, goitrogens, gluten, saponins. How much reading have you guys done on gluten? How bad gluten is? That's pretty much the devil at this point. You hear about celiac disease, but that's pretty much the end-all most inflammation you can find on this protein, okay? There are so many other things going on behind the scenes that we usually can't test for with a direct correlation to gluten at this point, and there's a lot of false negatives with gluten testing. That has got to be the bastard child protein out there, as far as everything from migraines, brain inflammation, just tearing your guts right up. I highly, highly suggest the book by David Perlmutter called Grain Brain. A lot of good information in on that book, and you'll pretty much go running the other way with your tail between your legs if anything gluten after you read that book. Saponins is the one that the potatoes rear their head. Okay, saponins is where it's almost like a soap type substance that you find in potatoes. It's very prevalent in potatoes. It's it'll erode and wash your intestinal lining away, or your glycocalyx or calyx in your intestinal wall. And what that really does is saponin, think soap. Every cell in your body is a lipid bilayer, which is a fat. So if you guys ever took that commercial, Dawn dish salt and put a drop in the dishwater and everything separates, that's where the idea behind potatoes comes in, that you can't have because they're high in saponins. Also, not to mention that it's a very high carb load, something that we didn't have from an evolutionary standpoint. So remember, we didn't cook, so you could make the argument that the potatoes were in the ground, but to make that carbohydrate a useful carbohydrate, you had to cook it to hydrolyze it, and the only way you could hydrolyze it is by cooking it, and that's just something we didn't have within the last 10,000 years. So I guess you could make the argument that you could make maybe 4 ounces of a potato, because that would be equivalent about 4 to 5 grams of sugar, which is all your body can hold at a blood level anyway. After that, it becomes toxic, and that's why your body releases insulin. Thought I'd just nip that potato thing in the bud early. So we won't spend a lot of time on the individual anti-nutrients. Here's my little tubers and saponins part. So people always make that argument right off the bat. Well, where do I get my where do I get my carbs? Where do I get my vitamins? And this is for the people that are pretty prevalent in the paleo world. There's a whole aisle. There's a whole section in your grocery store, the produce section, that is just full of it. And a lot of people make that argument about the all natural healthy whole grains. Well, there's nothing there unless they put a multivitamin into it anyway, which they ground up and bound with it. Okay. So, dairy. Dairy is another argument that you often hear pretty regular. So I want you to go back to that evolutionary template. Okay. There you are again, savannas of Africa, buck naked and rocking a stick, and you see this herd of 2,000-pound animals with horns, and you want milk. You don't have a bucket either, mind you. And you want milk. It's, from an evolutionary standpoint, something we didn't have. It's just something that doesn't work into our DNA. And there's a lot of problems with dairy. Not to mention it's a huge carb load. Some of us actually have that immune response to be lactose intolerant. There is actually a lot of research saying now that in the beginning we were all lactose intolerant, that we all actually got that sick. Evolution is not always something that happens in our favor. Evolutionary is a genetic mutation that goes unchecked, and then the generation after generation keeps going. Okay, so sometimes things drop out in our favor. One, maybe recognizing dairy as a poison and we get sick and stop drinking it. So back to my point, though, is if we lost that and that nothing really went unchecked, like it didn't kill us immediately kind of thing, and we had generation after generation that could reproduce and didn't actually stop that lineage, it's something that can continue on. Actually, lactase is the enzyme that actually breaks down lactose. It breaks it down to glucose and galactose, which is 2 other sugars. Okay. Here is another thing with another indicator that may be causing a lot of metabolic disease as far as the insulin resistance, the type 2 diabetes and stuff like that. Dairy doesn't always produce a glycemic load as much as it does an insulin response. So if you had someone who was testing their blood sugar per se, and they drink milk or they eat cheese or they do anything like that, and they check for their blood glucose at a blood level, they may not have a spike in it. So maybe if you have someone who's metabolic resistant, can pop anywhere from 100 to 200 level, blood glucose level, that might not show up with dairy. But what may show up is an insulin response, an elevated insulin response. And elevated insulin responses over time cause lots of inflammation. And again, which may inhibit recovery, may inhibit a lot of autoimmune responses and whatnot like that. So a lot of times I get the argument from the keto camp that, hey, it doesn't affect my blood sugar at all. I said, yeah, but how does it affect your insulin response? And this can be a case-by-case scenario too. It doesn't necessarily happen in every individual, but there's a large percentage of us that have a huge insulin response. And again, it's something that's not routinely tested for.
Do you think that's mainly because it's got the fat and protein in it, and so that's slowing the glucose response?
No, I think it has to do with your body's ability to digest with how much lactase you have. But the insulin response is being triggered by something else, and I think that's more of an autoimmune reaction. Does that make sense? So some people can really effectively break down the lactose, and they'll get some of that glucose level up. But I also think there's an autoimmune response going on causing the insulin to dump in response to that reaction that's going on. I don't know if that whole metabolic pathway has been pathed out or yet. I know there's a couple of guys that Lauren Cordain has mentioned in a couple of his journals that are doing research on that, and I don't know if it's been published yet or not. You ever say something?
So I have asthma, and I was lactose intolerant for quite a few years. I would drink lactate.
Uh-huh.
And a year and a half ago, I got LADA, so late onset type 1 diabetic. And I have a continuous blood glucose monitor, so if I drink milk, it won't spike, but it'll stay at a higher insulin level for a period of like 2 to 3 hours, and then it'll start going down.
I can see that. And there is, I don't know if I have the slide in here, I mentioned that maybe I don't have it in this presentation. There is a peptide, an aminopeptide reaction that happens when you drink milk too, that actually causes more, I don't have it in this one, I have it, I'll bring it up for you before we leave. Extra mucus production in your lungs that inhibits and causes it, makes it harder for you to breathe. It's another immunoresponse, okay? Casmorphins. Casmorphins is the aminopeptide that it actually releases that'll actually make it harder for you to breathe. So if Jamie so I pretty much started this keto paleo, I combined these two morphologies together, or ideologies together, and I started becoming more keto than paleo for a while, taking more liberties with the dairy. And I noticed that in the gym, I started slowing down. My breathing was really inhibited. My asthma started coming back. Okay? And it's Bartlett and someone else. I got the research in another PowerPoint that I did for the Keto Gains guys. I'll get that to you if you're interested. But no, there is science behind that. There is a journal article on that. So no, I experienced the same exact thing. And I actually experienced a level of bloating immunoresponse. Okay? And it definitely shows up around here, extra fluid retention and stuff like that, and in my armpits. And that's definitely an immunoresponse because I'm 44. And one of the reasons that I shifted over from paleo to keto was to look for that performance advantage. I hated not winning, okay? Flat out, I did not like it. I was looking for that competitive advantage. And I don't like when the high school kids come in and get close, okay? So one of the things that took me there was, ego. Yeah, it's a crazy thing. But it led me down a more optimal health path, right? And that's definitely one of the things. If I find myself hitting Starbucks and getting a heavy cream in my coffee too often, it definitely slows me right down. And if I'm getting ready to compete for anything, like Granite Games is coming up in 8 weeks? It starts in 8 weeks. You guys do that here too, Granite Games? The Open for that starts soon. I'll hardcore keto paleo for that, and I notice a big difference. And we'll talk about performance advantages here. I got a couple slides on that, but no, that's a real thing. That's definitely a real thing. And I have cousins. All my cousins suffer from asthma too. And I always tell them, I used to. You guys got to just change what you eat, and your odds are, we're the same, genetic background. It'll probably go away. You guys don't got to walk around with your inhaler. I mean, I had that thing in my center console. I had that thing in my gym bag everywhere I went. Yeah, if you can really reel that in, especially with the systemic inflammation from a high carb load, get yourself in that keto adapted state, which we'll talk about the difference between being in ketosis versus being keto adapted. Okay, there is a difference. Huge advantages once you cross that line. If you get as close to real food as possible and get yourself in that state of nutritional ketosis, it sounds like you kind of got that same background that I do. It'll just go away and you'll feel like $1,000. One of the other things, problems with dairy, casein proteins have a lot of immune stimulating properties. Something that comes right along with dairy or milk. Okay, so you guys know, we went back to my analogy of going up to this cow in the field with no bucket, right? That model is set up for baby cows, not you. So when baby cow is trying to get as big and as strong as possible, there's a lot of growth factor in mom's milk, right? That's just the nature of it. Baby cow comes out, or baby comes out. It's at a point in its life where it's very vulnerable. Genetically and environmentally, its advantage is to get as big as possible, as fast as possible. So with mom's blueprint, she releases a lot of growth factor into that milk. And I don't even mean what they pump with them at feedlots and stuff like that. I mean just naturally, mom's milk, cow's milk comes with a lot of IGF-1 in it, immunogrowth factor 1. And that's to get baby cow as big as possible. So go back to our analogy where we're drinking milk or natural healthy raw milk, which you actually get more of that growth factor because it hasn't been pasteurized. And let's say you have an underlying tumor somewhere. Something that you're on the edge of, and you introduce bovine growth factor to your system. You may really be proliferating that tumor at that point because you just introduced growth hormone from a 2,000-pound animal. And that's not even to say the feedlot stuff that happens to these guys, the stuff that they dump into them. You realize that 75% of the antibiotics in this country go to those feedlot cows to keep them alive long enough to kill them to eat them? That's crazy. That's a lot of drugs. So, I do get the question about whey protein isolate, taking whey protein shakes. That technically is a dairy, but if you get a quality brand, and there's a lot of good ones out there, you get what you pay for. They're usually cross-filtered enough that you don't get the immunodamaging effects of those things. But be careful, be leery. If you notice like you asthma stuff, you might want to cut stuff like that completely out. I always get the good source of vitamin D. All right, well, where do I get my vitamin D? Again, this is something that's added to the milk after the fact. You're supposed to be getting your vitamin D from the sun. There's actually 13 other phytonutrients your body gets from that chemical reaction from you being in the sun, as opposed to just taking a oral vitamin D. So we live in this world where you have tons and tons of sunblock, but we have the highest vitamin deficiency in the world. But the chemical reaction comes from the sun anyway. You got to sell you something every time, right? Most experts say you need about 2,000 IUs, international units, of vitamin D. That would be about 28-ounce glasses of milk to get that 2,000 international units of vitamin D, which is about 5,600 calories. Where's my fat loss people? Not to mention, it's just really foul math. Okay. That's the longer slide on it. So, how are we doing for time? I didn't want to talk for a ton. We're already 35 minutes into it. This is, like I said, this is something that I can talk about all day, every day. So, I'm just going to keep burning through this for another 20 minutes or so, and then we'll go into questions. And I hope you have a lot of them, because that's what I'm here to do, is help you guys get to what you want. All right. So you always get the argument along the way, how do you know that's what we ate? There's an anthropologist at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. They do a lot of research on isotopes in bone density out of prehistoric animals or Paleolithic animals. So in a nutshell, what they've basically done is they'll take bones from, let's say, Paleolithic wolf, and they'll take bones from Paleolithic cow, which are pretty much dominant carnivore, dominant herbivore. And they'll compare the isotope structure in the bones compared to the humanoids at that time, and that way they can come up with a ratio via that isotope imprinting to tell you where we fell in that genre. And that's how we can tell that we were mostly, actually works out to be about 90% carnivore versus omnivore or herbivore. Okay. So, how do we get fat? There's Tubby Jamie, and then there's my son next to me. And he's probably drinking a juice box. Be my luck, right? No, he's got a cup, but I'm going to say it's water in there. No, actually, he is my little water nut. We go to the restaurant and whatever. We have treat day once a week in my house. And even on treat day, he won't drink pop anymore because he knows how evil it is. As a matter of fact, that was my last hang-up was diet pop. And because I was all about the insulin response and the ketogenic thing that I figured, diet pop was okay. At the same time, I was the paleo guy, but I could not fight that addiction. The diet pop addiction is real. And I don't know if anybody who's been on it. And it's because they combine two chemicals together. It's not one or the other. Aspartame, yes, is the devil. Okay, it's a bad chemical. Caffeine by itself can actually be the devil. But when you combine the two, aspartame and caffeine, you get what's called an excitotoxin. You read a lot of research on aspartame, you read a lot of research on caffeine, but it's when you jam the two together that where you run into issues. It becomes this excitotoxin, which basically takes your brain cell to the point of excitement right before it dies. So it creates this crazy addiction. I've been off of it since January 1st because my son peer pressured me, and I still crave that stuff every single day. Every single day. So be leery of that. It's combinations of things. And the cancer-causing agent was actually the caramel color. 4-mel is actually what they use to make that pop caramel color, and they use it in maple syrup and they use it in all these other things, but that was actually the carcinogen. It really wasn't the aspartame caffeine thing. So we've learned about, now we're going to get into this a little bit for my metabolic type 2 people and weight loss people here. So you've heard of the glycemic index, right? And here's some pretty common foods. The glycemic index is something that was created, I think, in the late 80s by a couple of research guys that assigned a blood glucose scoring system to different foods. And they used white bread as the benchmark. They used X amount of grams of white bread, took like 150 people, measured their glycemic index. Pure glucose would equal 100, and everything else would fall into where it falls in there. Now you can see pure table sugar compared to natural, healthy, whole wheat bread, right? If that gives you any indicator what we talked about before about grains and breads being man's first processed food and where it kind of falls in that whole genre of things. And you would think from the marketing that they do that the natural, healthy, whole grains would be the way to go, right? Compared to table sugar or a Coke. And the truth of the matter is that the absorbable form of this at your lower intestinal level is the monosaccharide glucose. So it doesn't really matter if it started its life out as a fat-free bagel or a can of Coke. The absorbable form of this ultimately is going to be glucose at your intestinal level. And elevated blood sugar is very toxic to your body. I'm going to point out real quick that I keep putting that fathead icon in the corner. Have you guys ever seen that movie? Fathead? Buddy of mine, Tom Naughton, made that documentary. Very, very enlightening to metabolic processes. As a matter of fact, he just released a book this week, Fathead Kids. So if you have anybody in that middle school genre that he was actually targeting, Fathead Kids is a great book, and I actually have that at ketodaddy.com. Anything I talk about today, movies, books, documentaries, sweeteners, salts, I made a web page that I put everything in one spot called ketodaddy.com. So if you guys just write, so you don't have to keep a bunch of notes on anything that I mentioned here. If you go to ketodaddy.com, I put everything that I talk about in one spot. Most of it just shoots you to Amazon, don't get me wrong, but I wanted one hub where everybody would go and could get this, keto-friendly stuff in one resource. And a portion of the profits I always donate towards either some type of foundation that benefits from a keto diet. So epileptic foundations or Keto Pet Sanctuary or any type of metabolic disease thing. I'm taking a portion of those proceeds and I dump it towards a charitable organization. But ultimately I wanted a one-stop shop for you guys. So anyway, back to elevated blood sugar. So elevated blood sugar is actually very toxic. And that's why there is is anybody in here actually type 1 diabetic? Okay. So you know how important that is to keep that in a range. Where do you usually roll at?
This week, because I changed my diet this week, I'm in between 140 and 70.
Okay, where are you usually?
In between 400 and 60.
Yeah. So are you already on a ketogenic diet, or are you attempting a ketogenic?
I started it this Monday.
Good for you.
This Monday, it's saving my life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because insulin is a peptide hormone that's actually very inflammatory too. So the Band-Aid again was for type 1 diabetics.
Oh, and my insulin units, I was taking 40 a day, I'm taking 6.
Nice. Good for you. Good for you. So it's a very inflammatory thing. And exogenous insulin is even more inflammatory, which is what she's taking. So the Band-Aid for a lot of this is, I have a friend of mine, actually my friend of mine's daughter, almost like a little niece to me, she went type 1 diabetic at a very early age. And the way they present that insulin to it is, just keep an eye on your blood sugar, eat whatever you want, take your insulin. When the reality is, it's better to keep your insulin low, or your insulin usage low as much as possible. What does the ADA diet look like? I won't even tell you guys. What is the?
Like the American diet, just take insulin to cover the carbs.
It's actually.
If you have the carbs right, because if you don't, then you're going to be in spiking like I was.
Yeah, the actual percent formula that they use for the ADA diet is the same one that they use at the feedlots to get the cow's fat, percentage-wise. It's a huge it's a huge high-carb diet, but it falls under that natural, healthy, whole grain thing. Did you guys have plain Cheerios on that?
Plain Cheerios, I learned very early that I couldn't eat.
Yeah, exactly. So anyone that you know that's type 1 diabetic, ask them the difference between how much insulin they have to dump for a bowl of oatmeal versus steak.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. And that'll be the indicator right there. Okay? Into the role of insulin for our weight loss people. So the standard American diet, let's see what slide I have on here. All right, so we just talked about some of the metabolic diseases that come with high insulin resistance, hypertension, diabetes, elevated triglycerides, obesity. We'll skip over that hormone in the interest of time. But we'll get to this slide that's very important. So we just mentioned the ADA diet, which is American Diabetes Association diet. And that's also falls in the same lines as the standard American diet, the food pyramid thing that they used to preach, with grains at the bottom as the base of your diet. Would anyone know why that's the base of our diet? What's the last thing we're a world power at in this country? Why is it cheap, though? I mean, we'll get past that. The last thing we're a world power at in this country is grains, exportation of grains. It's about the only thing we got left. We don't have industrial left at all. So, and the reason grains are cheap is because why? Because we subsidize them. So in reality, we pay for them twice, because those subsidies come from whose tax dollars? Ours. So to say grain is actually cheaper than a bag of dirt at Home Depot just means that you paid for it twice. Okay? And they found a way to do that, especially with monocrop cultures and petroleum-based fertilizers that actually... Anyway, that'd be a completely different paleo subject. We'll get back to our why we get fat. So, standard American diet is actually a high-carb diet. And here comes in the model of eat less, move more. Okay, so if you follow that dietary guideline, eat less, move more, but you adhere to that high insulin reactive diet, insulin being the hormone that's actually your storage hormone or the gatekeeper between your fat cells, you will never be able to release that fat from stored adipose tissue, which Tom, I don't know if I'll have enough cord to get there, yes, which is Tom is kind of illustrating here. And he's got the sleeping cells down here. And so what that's really indicating is, so I'm going to eat less, move more. And how many people here have ever worked up an appetite? Right? So over time, your body's smart. If your body has an elevated insulin level because you have too high carb of diet, it won't release the fat from the cells, and you've cut your calories because you're not eating as much, it's got to start down-regulating your metabolism. And over time, that wears on you. Now you're starting to get tired and lethargic. I'm exercising more, I've cut my calories, but I'm keeping a all-natural, healthy whole grains in there, so my insulin levels are high, my body won't release fat from the tissue, I still feel like crap, my thighs are still big, blah, 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 and I'm tired all the time. F it, I'm going off the diet. And then what happens? How many people in here said, I've gone on a diet and gained more afterwards? Because you've already down-regulated your metabolism to try and feed your body. That's how that mechanism happens. That's why ketogenic diets can be so effective. Are they the silver bullet? Let me go back to that initial analogy where I said, is paleo the silver bullet or not? Not necessarily, but the mechanism for most of us that don't have a lot of other things going on, it definitely is definitely a biological advantage. When you set yourself into a state of nutritional ketosis, you down-regulate your carbs to the point where you start burning ketone bodies. And the reason you can do that is because you don't have an elevated insulin level. Your body can start releasing fat from its stores. That's why you find so many advantages to it as far as fat. So is everybody familiar with what macros are? I know I got a mix in here. Some of you look like seasoned vets, some of you look like you're learning. Macronutrients are your fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. If you flip over the label on almost anything, and now a word from our sponsor, Quest Nutrition. It'll give you a nutrition label on the back, and on the back it'll tell you about carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in that product per serving. Okay, so that's what I refer to when I'm referring to about macros. And that actually gets a little more complicated than that, and we can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A, and I'll help you dial in, for those that are actually looking to start a ketogenic, I'll help you dial it in. We'll talk about net carbs, we'll talk about proteins, we'll talk about fibers from green vegetables versus fibers that may be digestible, yada, yada, yada. But just so you guys all know that on the back of most foods, or even in databases, they have a nutritional value that consists of the three macromolecules that are digestible, and that's fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. I developed an app, and here's another little plug. I developed an app last year called Keto Check for beginners in mind, where you can flip something over, type in those nutritional values, and it'll tell you exactly where it falls in the percentage of calories for if it's going to be ketogenic or not. The new version of that is actually going to show ratios for my epileptics and my cancer patients, and it also is going to show total grams for everything that you want. So, very good training wheels for beginners. It's an app called Keto Check. The full version of it's available on Apple right now. The full version is coming out on Android. I have a simple model on Android right now, but those are both coming out for anybody with training wheels. And like I said, I wrote that program with a beginner in mind, so don't nitpick the hell out of me, but the beginner is in mind for that, and I think of stuff like my aunt who just got recently diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's trying to look into a ketogenic diet to help complement her chemotherapy, and she didn't even know that this existed. Did you know these nutrition labels that actually didn't become mandatory till the early 90s? So for some of us, we've always seen them, but for others of us, like my aunt who's 70, She didn't even really ever pay attention to that, what the heck that was. That was just writing on the back of the package. So that's where that comes from. And that'll help you if you know anyone who's trying to find their way. So what exactly is a ketone? Say, how many people have been looking up ketogenic diets online and getting confused? Okay, so you've heard acetone, you've heard beta-hydroxybutyrate, you've heard acetoacetate, all referred to as ketone levels. You have some people that hang their hat a lot on blood level ketones. You've heard exogenous ketone people telling you that helps you lose weight, all this other kind of stuff, and that's very confusing. There's 3 versions of a ketone that we'll find in our body or excreted from our body. Acetone is the one that we breathe or urine, okay, that comes out through urine. Beta-hydroxybutyrate is a blood level ketone. Acetoacetate is the metabolic version of the ketone, the one that you actually metabolize, okay? They are actually made from the liver and fatty acids. And I don't want to read the slide to you, but I'll read the slide to you. Chemically, they retain the similarities to that of fatty acids from whence they come, however, being much smaller molecules that are water-soluble, making them easy to transport in the blood, more like simple sugars. Okay, so when we're switching our body over to this nutritional ketosis versus a starvation ketosis, that's what your body is going to metabolize, and that is the end goal. Okay? Where's the athlete? There was an athlete that was in here that was specifically wanted athletic advantages. Okay, so there's a lot of advantages of being in nutritional ketosis. Yes, we'll come back to setting up a ketogenic diet. Don't worry, I just wanted to get the macro part out of the way. There is a huge advantage of being in nutritional ketosis for athletes. And I don't just mean stage 1 of, hey, I peed on the stick, I have ketones. I mean fully keto adapted. And by fully keto adapted, I mean in a state of nutritional ketosis for at least 6 weeks. That's when your body switches over to a really upregulated ketone burning machine. You'll see things out there, cyclical ketogenic diets, targeted keto diets, and stuff like that. That, I think, has its place for people who are more into the bodybuilding thing, the look. Because what I've found with a nutritional ketogenic diet, when you look at the aesthetics of it, a guy that's in total nutritional ketosis or keto adapted looks sinewy compared to the bodybuilders who have that puffy muscle look. Do you follow what I'm saying? Is there anybody who looks at fitness models or bodybuilding in here? You know what I mean by sinewy versus that puffy muscle look? If you were going for bodybuilding, I would say a cyclical ketogenic diet may be your thing. If you are going for performance, metabolic reasons, optimal health, I would get into ketosis and stay into ketosis 6 to 12 weeks at a time, if not full bore from there on out, because you'll notice such a huge advantage once all your enzymes get upregulated, once all your body gets adapted to burning that as a pure ketone, as a fuel source. Your organs are going to run smoother and better on it. Your heart and lungs run better on it. You produce less CO2, so you actually have less. How come the words escaping me? You actually produce less CO2. You have a lower acetate level, lower acid level, less lactate. Your body upregulates monocarbolic acid, which is actually metabolizes and shuttles lactate as well as the ketones. So you'll hear people say that I recover faster in nutritional ketosis, and what the reality is, because you're not breathing as hard, the respiratory quotient, that's the word I was looking for, is not nearly as high. So you won't breathe as hard either. Your pH will stay higher, it won't get as low, and that's where you get the oxidative stress advantages. You don't recover faster, you create less damage working out. So one of the things that they're finding with professional athletes later in life is that they're dying sooner because they burned a high-carb diet through their whole competitive years. Soccer players, football players, anything that's high cardiorespiratory is because the analogy that I use for motors and stuff like that is, so it's like having a Ferrari that you burned 87 cheapo glass on through your whole performance career. Yes, you still had that Ferrari. Yes, you were still performing, but your valves are going, your cylinder rings are going, your fuel filters are getting clogged because you burned a shitty fuel while you were in your heyday racing. Less oxidative stress running a ketogenic model through those years produces less damage. So they're finding with the research. Is there a ton of research on it? There's quite a bit now. But they're definitely finding it with the oxidative stress of burning a high glucose model through those years that it's actually causing a lot of issues too. You'll carry less water too. Your morphology will change. You'll have less body fat as a whole. And one of the things that I found with my powerlifting is that fat doesn't create any force. Does that make sense? For my athletes in here? If you're looking for your push press or your pull-ups or your muscle-ups, maybe you're just real close to those muscle-ups and you're 5 pounds away from it. If you are carrying less water because of the metabolic process, you may be there. A lot of people in my gym are finding that they're crossing that line going into nutritional ketosis because right off the bat they drop that water. Fuel advantages. On average, we can carry about 2,000 kilocalories of sugar. That's even a well-trained athlete at a cellular level, and how much glycogen we can carry in our liver. Okay? From fat stores, it's going to be upwards of 40,000 calories. So do I have any runners in here? No runners? Marathon? Ever run a marathon?
I ran a marathon last year, but I wouldn't call myself a runner.
Okay. I've ran, but I wouldn't call myself a runner either. Mostly from danger. One of the big advantages of that is being in that state of nutritional ketosis is one of the common things that you find with athletes is bonking. Okay? Bonking is where your body burns through that first 2,000 kilocalories of energy and has to flip over to a nutritional ketosis on the fly. They get brain fog, they get lightheaded, they get all this stuff, and they just have to basically soldier through it. Wrestlers and fighters do this too. I have a couple of kids that have gone through our program that were wrestlers that would wrestle all day on a Saturday, MMA fighters. People who traditionally, one of the best statements I ever had was a high school kid. And wrestlers are great for following rules for a diet. You tell them what they're going to eat, they eat, and that's it. You're going to eat this, Aaron. Okay, that's it. Great for following a protocol. One of the best statements he ever made for me was, Jamie, he goes, I used to just hang on at the end of Saturday. I used to just try to lock my grip and hang on. He says, now I can fight. I can fight all day. And I feel like when I started. That was some of the things that I ran into too. I started up in my training just recently because I want to try and compete at the Granite Games this year. So I started up in my squats heavier, I started running, and started putting harder wads in there. So for example, last week I ran my back squat up to 425, which is heaviest I've been. As soon as I got done, ran a mile. First run of the year. Next day did Linda, full prescribed. Didn't get sore. You guys know what Linda is? So it's deadlift, bench, and squat clean. Deadlift is 1.5 times your body weight, bench your body weight, and squat clean is 30 or 3/4 of your body weight. And it's 10, 10, 10, 9, 9, 9, 8, 8, 8, 7, 7, 7, 6, 6, all the way down to 1. I did it full prescribed, so it was 315, 205, 155. Squatted 425 the night before, ran a mile first run of the year, did Linda the next day. Sunday was fine, just came in and benched and did my normal routine. Once you get keto adapted, truly keto adapted, not just in nutritional ketosis, that's kind of performance you can get. I mean, I should have been rocked from the run. I was fine. There's a lot of people that just really, especially in the gym, notice these advantages, athletic advantages. From a fat standpoint, metabolizing fat, once you lower that insulin level, just by nature of the metabolism, you're going to metabolize more fat so you can burn more of your stored body fat. So those of you who are literally chasing fat burning mode, being in a state of nutritional ketosis is a huge advantage. I'm breathing on my hour here, guys. Steady visit stuff we talked about. Some of you who have been looking into it, especially my athletes, and if anyone athletes watching, are always worried about stripping their muscle, being in a state of nutritional ketosis. And I used to worry about that within the first few weeks too, when your body's switching over. But the truth is, once you get fully keto adapted, you have a higher branched chain amino acid profile. Your body just holds a higher level of branched chain amino acids, and you actually find that you can eat less protein and get away with it. That was one of the things that was my fear, but that was back to the ego thing, right? Big powerlifting Jamie was worried about losing his muscle. And if you were, just keep up maybe on a little L-leucine, because that's the amino acid that your body would strip from you. But I've done it with and without going into a state of nutritional ketosis now, and I haven't noticed a difference now. Okay, one of the things that people will warn you against, you say, hey, I'm going to be in a state of nutritional ketosis, and versus ketoacidosis, which is only one person in this room has to worry about that, and that's someone who doesn't produce any insulin at all. The difference between being in a state of nutritional ketosis versus being a ketoacidosis is like comparing a light rain to a typhoon. Okay, so if you get to the point where you want to check your blood level ketones, and you're going to be somewhere in the range of 0.5 to 5 millimolars of beta-hydroxybutyrate at blood level. State of nutritional ketosis would be somewhere in the range of 25 to 50 millimolars of blood level ketones, and you would have to have an elevated sugar level as well. Okay, so it has to actually work out. So she actually has probably no fear of being in a state of ketoacidosis as long as she keeps an eye on her sugar too. You can't combine the two. Okay? That's where the confusion comes from. And the only people that have to worry about that is type 1 diabetics, people who don't produce any insulin at all, because insulin is what will help bring that beta-hydroxybutyrate back down. This is a big buzzword in the ketogenic world. Is it a cancer killer? And current research shows maybe for some versions of cancer. Does anybody here know how a PET scan works? You guys heard of a PET scan? It's something that people go through when they're in a state of cancer. PET scan actually scans your body and looks for a state of upregulated glucose metabolism at a cellular level. So it looks for patches of cells in your body that's metabolizing a bunch of glucose. So the idea behind ketosis being a cancer killer is that if you lower your glucose level, don't give the cancer anything to eat, the tumor dies or the cancer dies. For some cancers, that's true. Some cancers can switch over to lipid metabolism. Okay, so it's not the silver bullet. Some cancers, they're finding that it really complements chemotherapy really well. Some they're finding it doesn't. Okay, but you'll find there's a lot of research being done on this. There is a great sanctuary in Texas called Keto Pet Sanctuary. And what those guys have been doing is they've been adapting people's dogs that have naturally occurring cancer and putting them on a ketogenic diet and following their progress. And I've seen a lot of research done on this, and I've been privy to a lot of the different pets and dogs that they've shown. And they've literally shown me dogs with legs so blown out with tumors that it looks like, like the elephant man kind of thing. And then 3 months later, just a little patch of hair missing, which is really, really amazing. Some of the areas where they run into issues with putting the dogs on a ketogenic diet, so say they have a tumor in a hard-to-get-to spot behind the heart or something like that, and they cut off the sugar to that tumor, and they put them on a ketogenic diet, all of a sudden the body recognizes that tumor as a foreign mass and tries to push it to the surface. And if it's not in an area where they can surgically get to it, sometimes they run into issues. But their success rate is somewhere in the 98th percentile with these dogs. Because they have complete adherence to the diet too. Why? Because they're feeding them. They have no choice. Here's your keto diet dog. But great success rate. And the farm is beautiful. If you go online and go to Keto Pet Sanctuary, I'll put a link up on ketodaddy.com. I got a feeling that's the first one I'm going to donate with my portion of my proceeds is to that one. Great videos online of these dogs that were just completely wrecked. 3 months later, 4 months later, look great. They're doing some really, really good work down there. They have their own dedicated PET scan machine, which is a multi-million-dollar thing just for these dogs. Just to prove that this is a very viable means of helping cancer. I've been burning through this for an hour. Let's talk about the cholesterol thing real quick, and then I'll open it up for questions. So that'll be the next thing you get, because you're basically, when we get done talking about formulating a ketogenic diet, you're going to find out that it's low carbohydrate, moderate protein, high fat. And in the 1950s, there's a guy by the Dr. Ansel Keys. He's actually the guy that came up with the K ration. Came up with what was called the lipid heart hypothesis, where he said that coronary heart disease is caused by a high-fat diet. And he collected all this data from about 13 different countries, chopped it down to about 7 countries that fit his hypothesis, and published it. And so was born the lipid heart hypothesis. And with that, they tried to paint the picture that there's good guy cholesterol and there's bad guy cholesterol, and a high-fat diet causes the bad guy cholesterol to rise, and that causes coronary heart disease, which in fact has never been true or ever proven. Okay? Despite all the drugs out there that they've developed along the way to help you lower your total cholesterol count, there is no correlation between a total cholesterol count and any type of coronary heart disease ever. Nothing has ever been shown or proved. If you have or know somebody that's on a statin, go punch that doctor in the face. It does so much more harm than good. So anyway, the picture they try to paint for us is there's the LDL, lipodensity protein, and HDL, high-density lipoprotein. First of all, those are lipoproteins. Those are carrying molecules for cholesterol. Cholesterol is a very essential part of our human existence. It is a repair molecule. It is also the basis of all our hormones are based off a cholesterol molecule. Okay? It is very, very important. Almost every cell in our body can create and make cholesterol. It is a repair hormone. So if you have any type of artery damage, what your body will do is take LDL molecules, and it'll send the cholesterol to that area and use it as a patch. And then the HDL, which is supposed to be the good cholesterol, will take any of the oxidative ones away. So the idea behind this is they find all this arterial stress and these plaques in these areas is like saying, and that's where they try to correlate cholesterol and coronary heart disease, when it's actually the patch, it's the molecule that repairs these things. It's like saying, it's the same as saying, every time we go to a fire, there's firemen. We better get rid of the firemen. Does that make sense? And that's kind of where they came with this whole thing. One of the actual problems with the plaques is not the plaques themselves, is that the fact that they break and go downstream. And one of the reasons that they break and go downstreams, again, is will rear its head is back to is wheat-containing lectins, WGA, and there are metalloproteinases that actually break up those caps and cause them to rupture. So high-grain diets cause those fibrous caps to burst and go downstream, and then when you have a blockage, that's when you have your issues. Okay, so cholesterol is really good. What does actually cause a lot of problem? Stress. Okay, stress is a big one. Smoking. Those are the kind of things that can lead to elevated inflammation and issues in your body. Okay, so if you guys have a seminar on how to relieve stress, I'll be the first one to sign up. That is one area that I definitely fall short in, working a full-time job and running a gym on the side and trying to be a full-fledged keto maniac. So those are things that you can look for. So if they're not testing, this is one I'll end on, and then we can open up the floor to questions. What are some of the things that I need to get checked for? So if total cholesterol count means nothing, Jamie, but people are still having heart attacks and strokes, what do I need to really get tested for? Signs of inflammation, homocysteine levels, C-reactive proteins, CoQ10 levels, insulin, LDL particle size, which is actually a density of your LDL. That's actually a sign of oxidative cholesterol versus non-oxidative cholesterol. So those are tests that you need to ask your doctor for if you were actually concerned about heart disease or it runs in your family. Another one's the calcium heart score. You can get that run as well. Those are things that you can actually get tested for that'll show true things. But that total cholesterol number doesn't mean anything. Okay. So anyway, that's my abbreviated version of it. And I got a ton of slides, and we talk about a bunch of different things. But I want to open up the floor to questions because I can talk all day. And I know some of you have come with some very specific things that you wanted to learn. So we can just start. Whoever raises their hand first, we can go. Or we can talk about some of the low-carb stuff that I brought, and then we can come back to it. Up to you. So does anybody have a burning question in their, on the tip of their tongues? Did I get it all? There's no way I got it all. There it is.
Well, the ketoacidosis versus the nutritional
Ketosis.
is the ketoacidosis where it's kidney, causes kidney damage.
Elevated, can cause issues like that, but the only people that have to worry about that is type 1 diabetics. And then you actually have to have an elevated ketone level and an elevated glucose level at the same time.
Elevated above 160 or elevated
I would say start paying attention if your blood glucose was above that 160 and your ketone levels were in the 25. Do you test both?
I've never had high ketones that I know of, but I have tested for them a couple times like a couple months ago.
Yeah, no, you're probably fine. I have quite a few friends that are type 1 keto dieters, and I can shoot you their links and stuff like that if you want. One's a doctor, other one's a diabetic expert. I'm actually speaking in Spain at Low Carb Universe in November. So if any of you guys can make that, it's going to be a nice trip. And I might be going to San Diego here in a couple of months just to go learn more.
Are these friends around here or?
No, Florida, and I don't know, where's Hannah at? Hannah's in Sweden too. But everybody's very accessible online. So back to that levels. Okay, so we talked about metering and checking levels a little bit. There's a blood meter. You can check your blood glucose level and you can check your blood ketone level. Let's talk about testing real quick. So I take testing with a grain of salt. Now, my background is science, so I love numbers. So it's hard for me to completely ignore. I don't want you to think I'm a data snob because I think it's important to a lot of people. And there's people, epileptics and cancer patients and stuff like that, that have some advantages to knowing where their beta-hydroxybutyrate level is or their acetone levels are. The way I handle it in my gym is that people start on a ketogenic diet, and I'll use Todd as a perfect example. Jamie, I started the ketogenic diet. Great. I've lost 34 pounds already. That's awesome. I feel great. My blood profile's turning around, less inflammation, everything's going great, good. I want to get one of those blood meters now to see where my beta-hydroxybutyrate levels are. Todd, yes. You just told me that you've lost 34 pounds, yes. That your blood profile's turned around, you'll feel great. Tons of energy, you look great. What do you care? It's working. Chase results, not ketones. And that's a big Keto Gains thing. If you're not familiar with the group Keto Gains on Facebook, that's another great resource, especially for athletes going into the bodybuilding thing. There's a lot of bodybuilding guys on there, but they have Luis and Tyler have some really good stories too. Tyler Cartwright, a great guy. He started his journey at 500 pounds. And he's down under 200 now, I think. He just had surgery to have all his excess skin take away. That's another great resource, is the Keto Gains guys. I spoke at their seminar in Vegas in October. But chasing ketones, be careful. You don't need to. There's some great tools out there, and my next few Facebook videos will be about that. But if you're getting the results, just stay on that path. You're doing fine.
My big question is the dairy. I don't see any dairy up there. A lot of the keto stuff that I've read, everything's cream cheese in it, mozzarella, heavy dairy. And then paleo is no dairy. So what's the balance there?
Right. So.
And dairy scares me for the inflammation part.
Yep.
I also think dairy, you think fat. I mean, that's how I was raised. If you're eating a lot of cheeses and stuff like that, it's high in fat, which I know keto is supposed to be high in fat. It still scares me. It's like a mental thing.
It's huge. It's huge. So let's answer that question. So back to what I said in the beginning. I started paleo, and I got a lot of health benefits from paleo. And I stumbled across keto for performance. And along the way, I've learned a lot about metabolic diseases and fat loss and cancers and all that kind of stuff. I've combined the two ideologies to what I think, in my opinion, is the ultimate diet for optimal health and performance. To answer your question, why mine doesn't have any dairy is because I've held on to the Paleo grocery list. I think there's more health advantages to keeping that dairy out. Some people on the keto web pages like you are reading came in from the other way. Okay, so the 400 or 500 pound gorilla in the room in this country is a high carb diet. If you get anything out of this seminar, know that the high carb diet is probably causing you more damage than anything off the Paleo grocery list versus the dairy grocery list versus anything. It's a high carb diet that's beating the hell out of us in this country. And if you were going to battle anything first, I would probably say get the high carb diet out of there. Make dairy maybe the next step. There's a lot of people in here that can't jump in all or nothing. I couldn't. I leaned into it with the Paleo. Remember, I started with breakfast only. Lunch was still fast food, dinner was still whatever I grabbed on the way home. You have to find out where you can start, because this ultimately has to be a lifestyle change. This isn't a 30-day program. I offer a 42-day program for people who just want everything written out for them. That's just to get you started. And the reason I went with 42 days is that's 6 weeks, and that's how long I feel it takes someone to get really keto adapted. And some people like, what do I eat? I understand that now. I didn't understand that before. I used to just do this and be done. Program 42 has been hugely successful for me. I literally figure out what your BMR is, what is your goal, is it performance, is it optimal health, is it weight loss. I write out a 6-week program, a view of everything to eat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and usually by the time you're done with that 6 week, you figured it out. You know what's going on. But yeah, you're right. Dairy this, dairy that, high fat this, high fat that. Fat is not the enemy. When I say no dairy in my regard, it's because of the casein proteins, it's because of the growth factor, it's because of the insulin response. It's not because of the fat. It's another argument they make, like, you know, I know a great source of nicotine. Nicotine's a great stimulant. What am I talking about, right? Yeah, I'm talking about smoking. You know, you don't want to take the baggage along with that, right? So you're right. And if you're maybe coming into it from the Paleo side of thing, you know, which is what I did. And yeah, like I said, I bounced into that dairy thing for a little while. My asthma came back, inflammation, you know, everything like that. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't put it in there. And right now, since I'm training hardcore for that Granite Games things, it's not on my radar at all. Did that answer your question? Is that what you?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's kind of more performance, and then I'm looking to, tone up more, I guess.
That might come with it as soon as the dairy. Are you currently eating dairy?
I'm currently eating everything.
It might go. And you're on the standard American diet.
Yeah.
Standard American diet, sad diet. Yeah. Just.
But I do have another question of that.
Go.
Is alcohol or wine. I mean, I like it.
Yeah.
So I like the honesty.
You can. All right. So if you're not metabolically wrecked, and a lot of times I'll say the metabolically wrecked people, they're people that come in toting this huge belly. You could probably keep it in there, but keep like gluten-free, clear spirits in there. And there's some. I'm not a big wine guy, so you'd have to do a little research.
Well, I found a place, yeah. I was scared, but you don't know enough. Okay.
I would say in very much moderation, because alcohol gets metabolized immediately as like a triglyceride, which is what adheres to the alcoholic fatty liver disease. And if you're fighting a lot of metabolic issues along the way, I'd say chuck it. If you're struggling so hard with the idea of cutting alcohol that it's driving you nuts, you may have a bigger problem. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I say that jokingly, but if the idea of cutting if me saying, yeah, why don't you go 2017 without another drink, and you fall to the floor, there may be an issue. You know?
Coffee would be part of it.
Coffee. Well, everyone's got their thing. I told you up until January 1st, mine was Diet Pop, right? And I was making that allowance. And I tell you what, you can be very successful if you are 95% adherent to that diet and you had a glass of wine once a month or two, or maybe you got completely blotto once a month. You probably do great because your body will reply. You know, Lauren Cordain says you can be very successful being paleo 100%, or being 100% paleo 80% of the time or 85% of the time. You know, your body is pretty miraculous. Look at some of the people you know that live out of a Speedway gas station, right? You know, and you see, oh, I hate this too. Get on Instagram and see a lot of these CrossFit guys eating donuts. I'm like, stop it. Stop it. You know, you're setting an example. You know, everyone knows those are bad for you. Don't do that. Don't glorify crap just because it's funny. You know, but no, I think you could probably be very successful. If you came in and you were like 300 pounds sitting there, I'd say you might want to wait until you achieve a goal and then come back to it. I can't define for you what's healthy enough. That's different for you, and you. You have to make that decision. You can come in and I can present all this information for what I feel is the optimal health diet after years of research. And you can say, I don't care. And that's your choice, not mine. You know, I'm just here to provide the information. You make your decisions, you know.
So I've been on a statin prescription for probably close to 30 years. When I'm not on a statin, my cholesterol level is about 459.
459. You may have something different than your average person who goes 205 and gets put on a statin.
No, I'd be thankful for 205.
What's your LDL?
I don't remember. I don't know. So would I, if I went on this diet, would I want to go off of the statin, or would it be something that I would monitor with? I go to an integrated.
I would monitor it with your doctor.
Okay.
I would get some of the actual inflammatory tests done that actually show that. I would get LDL density particle size tested too, because that's actually where the thing is. This is the same for anybody who's battling anything type 2 diabetic. All right, I've been on Jimmy Moore's low carb cruise with Dr. Westman, where he got a woman off insulin within 5 days because she went on a total ketogenic diet, no carb. She went completely zero carb. All right, remember how we mentioned before that a nutrition label has total carb, and then I'll have subsidies of that, sugar, fiber, sugar alcohols. Dr. Nally and Dr. Westman are of the opinion that you go off the total carb number. I'm of the opinion that once you're savvy in that world, you can go with what they call net carbs. And let's talk about that real quick. Underneath that total carbohydrate, they have those subcategories: sugar, alcohols, fibers, and sugar. And if you're savvy with your sugar alcohols and you're savvy with what fibers are digestible and non-digestible, you can subtract them from the total carbohydrate and you'll get what is called your net carbohydrate, which is actually the digestible version of it, which actually, what I talked about before, the absorbable form of that is a monosaccharide called glucose. That's how you can get to that. In the beginning, when you're on training, and that's what I helped develop my app with. There's actually a button on there that'll subtract the two or keep the two if you want. That's real helpful for beginners. That will help you dial that in. But to go back to your question, yes, monitor your diet with that, see what happens, but I would get those other true inflammatory markers tested, because that'll be a better indicator of what's going on systemically with you if you have any risk.
They do say I have inflammation. I get tested regularly.
So you might have those other in there and you never knew what they were until, the homocysteine levels and C-reactive proteins.
I don't take homocysteine.
Yeah, keep an eye on those. I would look for the real signs of inflammation and work with your doctor on the blood test. The ones tests that I mentioned, they don't routinely do. And depending on what insurance plan you have, they won't do either. Unless you mention that mom or dad and grandma and grandpa died of a heart attack. Okay? Then you can get those tests run covered. Does that make sense? Because I've had to do that before. Unfortunately, we pay so much for insurance and you got to work it.
So when, so say you want to just eat 20 grams or less of carbs a day, is that total carbs? Or net?
Yeah, that would be, well, I would say net. Okay, so it would be total carbohydrate minus, if, like I said, if you know what fibers. Usually fibers and green vegetables, no, you don't digest those. Those just pass through. Couple sugar alcohols, erythritol and xylitol, they pretty much pass through inertly as well. Other things like maltitol and some of those other things, they don't. Be careful of combos too. Like everyone's heard of stevia. Stevia is supposed to be great. But there's a product out there called stevia in the raw that uses a bulking agent that actually turns to glucose. So you got to be careful. You know, stevia glycerate's okay, but stevia in the whatever in the raw, you know, if you flip it over and it's anything other than that, you got to be cautious. And then by definition, anything in a box sometimes falls under labeling loopholes, so you got to be really careful of what's in there. You know, you'll see stuff like, you'll probably pay attention to say ADA approved. And you're like, that's pure sugar. How could that be ADA approved? You know, somehow a labeling loophole, it got in there. But to go back down to, let's talk about breaking down a ketogenic diet. Athletes can probably stay closer to the upper end a little bit with a little more carbohydrate, maybe up to 50 grams. If you're just Sally Homemaker, 20 to 10 is where I keep mine. Switching over to a ketogenic diet, if you're an athlete, make sure you drink a cup of broth a half hour before you work out. If you feel what's called, if you get online and you hear about this thing called the keto flu or whatever, all that is your body's dropping sodium and it drops the blood pressure, so you feel that lightheaded, foggy thing because your body doesn't have the carbohydrate to hold that sodium anymore. You can only hold it at a blood level anyway. So a cup of broth will knock that out now. I mean, like now. You'd be like, I feel like crap, what's wrong? Oh yeah, I'm fine. Especially before a workout. If you guys are doing CrossFit workout, half hour before with a lot of water, you'll notice a huge difference. If you do any type of powerlifting or heavy lifting, cup of broth a half hour before. I have broths on ketodaddy.com if you guys are curious as to which ones I use. There's a cheapo on there that you can get right at Meijer's, and it's got a bunch of crap in it. And then there's some real good bone broths and stuff like that too. But what you're actually looking for is the sodium to keep your elevated blood pressure so you don't get all foggy. So under 50 grams of carbohydrate on average, moderate protein, and there's a couple of different ways to do this. My app has a basic BMR on it, which is a basal metabolic rate calculator. And what you do with that calculator is you kind of figure out where your body weight is between height, weight, and age. And if your goal is to lose a little fat, use a slider on there to lose maybe 5 to 10% of those calories. If all you do is train for 1 hour a day, and other than that you're a desk jockey, I'd keep yourself at sedentary to mildly active, because the only people I put at active is like construction workers and waitresses who are running around like a nut. Other than that, even myself who train at least 2 hours, 4 to 5 times a week, I put myself at moderately active, because other than that, I'm sitting on my ass. I'm in a car driving, I'm behind a desk, I'm maybe standing here like this.
So moderately active is below 50 or lower than that?
I was talking for the BMR calculator. There's a selection on there.
That'll give you your AMR, right?
What's that?
That tells you what your AMR is.
Yeah, it'll give you a number, and then it gives you actually a deficit slide too. That's just a place to start. That is not gospel, by the way. Any calculator you find online, Keto Gains guys has a great calculator too. They attack it at a little bit different level from me. They add more protein in it per lean body mass. Again, it's a number to start with because it becomes highly individualized. For those of you that are battling fat loss and you start down this ketogenic pathway and it may not be working for you, there is other variables besides nutrition at play here. I mentioned stress. Stress is a big one. Stress, and Jimmy Moore uses this all the time, stress is dessert spelt backwards. There's hormone issues. We've been at a constant chemical bombardment since the 70s. I find this so often in my gym with women that their hormone levels are really jacked up because of constant chemical bombardment, elevated insulin levels over because they've had a bowl of Special K and a glass of juice and a cereal bar for the last 20 years, and they were told that was healthy by the ADA or whoever else. I had a bowl of Special K and a glass of orange juice and a granola bar. I should be good. Oh, yeah, it's complete garbage. So no, you might be completely damaged. Another one that's a huge adherence is intestinal overgrowth, bad normal flora. There's a lot of research being done now on your gut being our second brain. And actually, just recently I watched a documentary on it. Technically might have been the first brain, because as a species, we evolved as just something that ate, swam, and pooped. And there's enough neurological activity in this level, it's that of like a golden retriever. And that the second brain may in fact be this brain that evolved from when we learned to cook food. Where we could see, look, and respond, stuff like that. That in our intestine, like you feel, I feel it in my gut. Something's not right.
Do you know of a lab that tests for it? Because unless you hit like the functional medicine world of doctors, I work in the medical field and I can't find anywhere other than... I have a couple of good resources. There's the Dr. Mark Iajani out of Texas. He's a great online resource. He'll do everything via Skype or on the phone for you, and he'll send you for local blood tests. I'll put something up underneath this because don't ask me to spell Mark Iajani. It's Justin Health, I think, is his webpage. There's a place in Ann Arbor that can get you started called the Bioenergy Medical Clinic. They'll do Nutri-Evals and stuff like that. They'll check for intestinal overgrowths, gut biome. Check like that. So here's another thing. People often, especially athletes, ask me about supplementation and supplements. I'm a big fan of supplements for athletes. Our food quality sucks, especially factory farms. I was very successful losing weight and losing my asthma and stuff from normal grocery store stuff. It wasn't until I got more introduced to farmers markets and different ways to do things that I actually started taking it to that next level. Like I buy most of my meats from a buddy of mine who keeps his cows in pasture until they're big enough to kill. Do you need to take it to that level right away? I don't think so. Will some of you ultimately have to take it to that level? You might. I know some people that are mostly guys, very successful ketogenic, following it loosely. My women always have to be way stricter adherence. And a lot of times there's other issues. There's hormone issues. There's those gut issues. There's stress issues. Play a big role in this. This is just one of those variables to optimal health. There's other things going on that, from an environmental standpoint, have beat the hell out of our bodies. And especially me, I was born in the 70s, so that was right at the beginning of the whole feedlot thing and food preservatives and all that. I got in on the cusp of that, There's a lot of things out there.
How long does it take your body to revert back to working on carbs instead of fat? So, say you went on vacation for a week after being strict for 6 months.
Okay, so going which way? Going from fat to carb or carb to fat?
How long would it take to revert back? Like I said, if you go on vacation for a week, is it going to completely undo everything?
Yes, and completely smash it to smithereens. Now you can go back to, you can go from, so you get completely keto adapted, you're a saint for that 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks or whatever. You blow out the doors with a cheat meal. Yeah, pretty much. Now you can get back into ketosis fast. But to be completely keto adapted and feel those action figure style effects that I'm talking about, it's probably going to be that 4 to 6 weeks again. Switching from fat to sugar within 48 hours. Your liver will be back within 12 hours, and your body will completely switch back over within 48 hours. Now, could you play a carb game with your body and trick it? Say you're in that 10 to 20 grams of carbohydrate a day, and you have one meal, and it's like a bowl of Captain Crunch, and you figure something out that's almost pure glucose, not fructose too, and went for a run afterwards. I don't know. I don't know if enough science has been done on that. I know that Jeff Volek and Stephen Finney, which are kind of like the gurus, I've watched webinars with them where they say, yeah, it's like, boom, you're done, and you got to get back keto adapted again. I've done 2-dayers and stuff like that where I've completely blown the doors off, and yes, I had to go to feel that action figure mode through. But I'm older though, and I came from a metabolically wrecked background. You know, if you grew up on a farm and were pretty much paleo your whole life, it may be different for someone. But I was drinking a 2-liter of Pepsi a day. You know, my keto adaptation takes every bit of 6 weeks, where I know other people who have got keto adapted and felt good within 4 weeks. And that's usually younger people. But, you know, it's a fine line. It's, you know, I had a lot of eggs and bacon growing up, where I know a lot of the generations after that, born in the 80s and 90s, have had cereal, period. So could you play a carb game and do a blowout, or like you were saying, maybe get completely blotto one night and go for a run the next day and burn off all that sugar? Maybe. I can't say completely. You know, I know there's different thought processes out there, but like I said, Volek and Finney pretty much are like, no, you got to get completely keto adapted again, and that's been my experience too. So. But at the same token, so at the same token, I did it for the first time in 2012. I got ready for WPC Worlds, which was like our Super Bowl of powerlifting. I did a 12-week ramp up, and Worlds was in Vegas that year. And we did a complete 12-week cycle. 6 weeks got keto adapted. 6 weeks after that was bulletproof. My training was awesome, less oxidative stress, stronger than hell. PR'd on the platform at a world meet, which on a world meet, usually the nerves you hope to break even. And I PR'd on my squat and my bench, and the only reason I didn't PR on my deadlift too was because my back tightened up on my bench a little bit. I didn't know as much about the sodium in the broth at that run. Otherwise, I'd have had a cup of broth between each thing. And my nerves were going, right? And then completely blocked, because that was in November. Then we were in Vegas and just could completely cake and Jaeger the next 24 hours. So this is my evolution of this now, mind you, and I can't tell you where you're going to fall on this. You got to make your own decisions. The next year I did 10 months because my birthday's Halloween, and it worked out perfect. I figured I'm going to start January Monday, first thing Monday, like everybody else, and I went hardcore keto paleo all the way till I picked another meet in October, a state meet, powerlifting meet, and I was doing CrossFit too. And around the 6-month mark, I felt another shift. And it's another shift that I think happens at a pituitary level, that your body says, okay, this is our new fuel source. And my composition changed again, and that respiratory coefficient changed again. I could not get tired running. I could not get to that point. It was always just breathing. And I call that action figure mode, or super keto at that point. That was amazing too. But I've only known a few people that have experienced that around the 6 to 8 month mark of being keto adapted. Another guy is by the name of Gasper Grom, who does this out of Europe, or Slovenia. And Dr. Finney has a theory on it, but no testing on it. Once you stay keto adapted for a long period of time and you're a performance athlete. Because they've done 6-week studies, 12-week studies, but to get adherence for that long is, in America anyway, is really, really hard, because we got crap on every corner, which is what this slide was about, you know. So now I'm of the opinion with lots of resources out there that I probably won't come out of ketosis ever again by my own choice. There's recipes out there. I've had very successful birthday cake, very successful ice cream, keto. Quest Nutrition has a whole Quest Keto line now, and they're really good about helping me and giving product, which we got over here. You guys can give a try today. KetoCookie.com, K-O-O-K-I-E. Those things are delicious. Now they are. It's supply and demand, right? As the supply comes up. Recipes, though, keto-paleo.com, my blog, which is probably I might have to move it over to another server soon, but I have a ton of recipes that we put through the holidays. My gym has a keto baker now, Stacy. She fills that fridge with keto cookies, keto cheesecakes, keto carrot cakes that are just unbelievable. You know, I don't think you have to go out anymore because we found a way to use different things to cook with. And that's all it is a reprogramming. You know.
So what does she usually use as the sweetener? Does she use like
Erythritol. Erythritol has been the one that we've found that passes through pretty much inertly. It might be 0.2 calories per gram, like 0.02 calories, I'm sorry. It passes through pretty much inertly and tastes pretty dang sweet. That's what I know Quest has shifted a lot of stuff over to.
So more than the xylitol?
More than a xylitol. Yeah, we like erythritol right now. I don't have a ton of experience with that. I just know that Finney and Volek are big fans of xylitol, and that's pretty expensive. Which
What about the Swerve?
Swerve, I think, is erythritol.
It is? Okay.
Is that one? That one's erythritol. It's like a confectioner sugar. It'll actually give you that sugary, gritty taste. I've had some pretty amazing stuff over at Quest Labs, R&D too, that's coming down the pike. And keep an eye on questketo.com. Stuff comes and goes. There's cinnamon roll. If you don't mind a little bit of dairy, because I use a cream cheese as the frosting. But if you're looking for that treat, unbelievable. They have a PB&J. They have a PB&J that's unbelievable. Almond butter and jam, I should say. That's unbelievable too. And like I said, everybody growing up in the standard American diet, we're programmed for those treats, right? We associate treats. There's a lot of psychology behind this, right? So this last summer I went to Kalahari Water Park with my kids. And I'm looking around at the psychology of this. We're on vacation. We're having a good time. We're all eating crap. You get programmed that way. Disney World is a perfect example of that. I'm not saying anything bad about Disney World, but I'm saying you associate that good time with crap food. So you come back to the world, and you still got to go to work, and it's still raining, and it's still crappy outside. There's one thing you can go back to that's a strong association with that good time you had when you weren't working and having fun, and that's crap.
Have you ever dealt with somebody that has a nut allergy that has gone through this?
Yeah, they just don't use them. Yeah, and I'm slowly working those out of the diet completely. They may be off my paleo list here pretty soon. The more and more that I read,
Because of the omega-6s?
no, more because the autoimmune stimulating properties with a lot of the nuts. A lot of women have trouble with almonds and a lot of fungus and intestinal overgrowth and stuff like that. And that's something that's right out of the 1972 Atkins book. You know, avoid almonds, avoid nuts, fungal overgrowth.
I've noticed, and this is just lately, which is interesting to bring that up, since we started keto paleo diets, we started right after your last seminar. I can't eat almonds. I get sleepy.
Yeah.
I started, I thought I had a bug, and I started, because I eat almonds every day.
Yeah.
And cashews. So I started drinking ginger ale because my stomach was upset every day. I thought, man, I got this little bug, I can't get away with it. Now I know, anytime I eat almonds or cashews, I get a bug.
Yeah. And historically, when I've done diets for people, even when I was paleo, if I had, and it's usually women, had a heart, they're always my that 9 times out of 10, I can get a guy that just rocks on these diets. It's always my women that throw me curveballs. A lot of times I got to say, well, for one, they almost always got to cut dairy for results, and nuts. Nuts is a
I was going to say nuts. When I went strict paleo, my first, full year, I digested always feel the best, and it was because I was eating too much nuts. If I limit them, then I feel better.
Eggs is another one, and I think that has to do with the damage that we've done with factory farming over time. That if something has caused a protein in some of the eggs to really rear its head with some people, and I don't think that's an evolutionary thing as well. Technically, I guess it could be, as much as it is a factory farm thing. And a lot of people think, well, I'll take it out of my diet for 6 weeks and see how I do. No, 6 weeks and shit. You got to go 6 to 8 months, maybe 9 months before your body will not have an immunoresponse to that, and maybe you can introduce them back in. But at the point where you felt success and you've kept it out, why? You know, you got to dismiss a big problem that I find a lot of times is we have food as entertainment in this country as opposed to fuel. And in reality, we've evolved from a species who spent most of our time starving. So if any of you guys who've ever walked through the woods think, I got to eat. How much stuff was seasonal? How often could we, in fact, get a full meal? I mean, how often was it maybe squirrel, rabbit, squirrel, you know, how often did you actually take something down and gorge on it? Not unless you had a pack of your buddies and some of your dogs with you. You know, we hardly ever gorged on anything, and going a day or two without eating, that's another thing you see a lot of going hand in hand with a ketogenic diet is intermittent fasting. I skipped breakfast. I intermittent fasted. No, you didn't. You skipped breakfast. From an evolutionary standpoint, we didn't get up and make a plate, right? You got up and you started looking for food. And it might not be lunch, dinner time, or that evening till you found something. So from an evolutionary standpoint, does intermittent fasting by current definition make sense? Yeah, because I doubt we ever got up and had breakfast waiting.
I was going to ask you kind of along the same lines about when you do go for a run. If you're going to run for a marathon, do you need to refuel? Or do you just go?
You'll find that once you get keto adapted, you can walk through that gym door or for that run without doing any of that old mentality, because you don't have to cap off that 2,000 calorie tank anymore. You're fat adapted. You're ready to go. I've PR'd on stuff completely on eating for a day. You know, so some of the people in our gym have done PR'd on bench press in the 400 range without eating a week. So don't tell me that, you know, once you're keto adapted, though, this was someone who was keto adapted, and
So you don't believe in the intermittent fasting? Or?
I just don't agree with the way they define it. I do agree with it. I think it's a good thing because from an evolutionary standpoint, we didn't get 3 square meals a day. That was something that came from the industrial era. You got up and ate something before you went to work, you got a lunch break, and then you ate after you came home from dinner. From an evolutionary standpoint, we didn't eat 3 meals a day. So I just joke it. They called it, I didn't eat breakfast. I intermittent fasted. I said, well, you call it whatever you want, but you didn't eat breakfast. It sounds fancy, right? It's a buzzword. Do I agree with skipping a meal? Yeah. I just like making fun of that current buzzword for that. Same with complex carbohydrate. Oh, it's a complex carbohydrate. You mean a starch? No, now it's a complex carbohydrate. Oh, what's the absorbable form? Glucose? Okay, then what's the difference? Good. You guys got a lot of good questions.
I am a keto newbie. I know nothing about keto. So
Perfect.
Very basics are what I need to understand. So you're telling me there's no differentiation between green leafy vegetables and a potato as far as when I'm tracking my carbs. If I want to if I'm eating 20 grams of carbs, I can eat it any old way I choose. If I'm a hungry girl, I'm going to eat a lot more greens. If I'm not a hungry girl, I'm going to eat a potato because I want it.
So I would say, to be strategic, I would go with the green vegetables as much as possible because of the nutrient density. I would say avoid the potato because of the saponins and the other hydrolyzed versions of carbohydrate. Are all carbohydrates created equal? No. So I could tell you, yeah, you could pace out 10 Skittles, 10 pieces of Skittle. No. From an evolutionary I guess from an insulin response, you could say that, but that's mostly fructose, not glucose. So, yeah, I'm sorry. So, stick to real food as much as possible.
Well, okay.
Mhm.
I eat a lot, and I want to eat a lot. I'm wondering if maybe the keto changes that, but I do eat a lot of fat already, but the primary that I eat is vegetables. I like my vegetables. I don't eat a lot of fruit. And I'm just wondering
You may be in it already.
how I'm going to feel.
You,
You should see this girl, she's pretty quick around.
you may be in ketosis already and don't know it. If you're just eating meat and green vegetables all the time, it just may have just been defined for you today, and that's the only thing.
Well, I'm thinking I eat more than 50 grams.
Well, from green vegetables, a lot of them are in the version of fiber, and green vegetable fiber is not digestible. So you'd have to look at your total calorie count to see where you're at.
You do take into account fiber and
Yes.
carbs.
Yeah, that's what I said. Once you get fiber knowledgeable or savvy, like some of the stuff in packaged products are fibers that may digest or may die digestible. And some of the sugar alcohols, like maltitol and some of the other things, are actually digestible, even though they fall under that sugar alcohol umbrella. So once you become a little more, so green vegetable fiber, no, don't count that. Subtract that from your total carbohydrate. That's why I'm saying you might be in it already.
So you kind of don't even count that as a carb if you drink vegetables.
Yeah, that's back to the net carb thing. And that's when I say, so that's why I said there's people in here of all different levels that understand this. So like I said, Dr. Nally and Dr. Westman, I think they do this as a blanket statement. They say 0 carbohydrate because your body doesn't need them. Your body will generate any type of glucose it needs via gluconeogenesis, and it'll strip some fat or protein, whatever it needs to produce that. And you will still hold that 70 to 100 range. I've seen some people dip down really low, but as far as a blood glucose level or whatever. But your body only needs 4 to 5 grams at a blood level anyway, which is like a teaspoon of sugar.
Ketosis though, 'cause she drinks.
Yeah.
Because she drinks it. So wine night's changing to tequila night.
And I understand the biology of it all. Yeah. I just don't know.
You're going to have to play with some of the numbers.
Yeah.
You're going to have to play with some of the numbers and find out where you really fall. And if it's green vegetables, subtract the fiber. And what is your go-to vegetable?
I love zucchinis. I eat a lot of cabbage type stuff, cruciferous stuff.
Yeah, you might be in it and not even know, other than drink night. What's that? I missed what you said.
Cucumbers.
Yeah, those are all high fiber, a lot of water.
So
Maybe it won't be as big a
to piggyback on hers though, so yeah, so start from scratch. We would go to your website, we do our basal metabolic rate.
Actually, it's an app called Keto Check.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
Okay. So,
It's only on Apple right now, but
so that's where we would start. So we.
yeah, anybody in this room that wants a BMR run, just email me. I got cards up here. What your macros are going to be. I'll run a macro profile for you.
So that's not on the app.
It is on the Apple version of the app, but I'm just saying if somebody wants some help with that,
I'll take
you know, yeah. But I mean, it's a 99-cent app, and it's right in the back, and you guys can play with it all day, every day. And it's like I said, it's a training wheels for. It'll be on Android soon, hopefully within the next week or two. But it's called Keto Check, and you can play with it. And like I said, it's not something to be etched in stone. It's something to give you guys a starting point. You know, and it's not saying because, and I back that up, and I keep saying that is because we're not a checkbook, we're not a spreadsheet. I can't say that at midnight everything refreshes. I can't say that you take a nap everything doesn't change. You know, it's a place to start, and I'm not saying that's a bad place to start because a lot of people like a number. And a lot of times people will start creating a food log and stuff will come into focus and they'll be like, wow, I don't eat any protein. You know, that was me. When I was Big Fat Jamie, I was lucky to eat 100 grams of protein. You know, and the theory at the time, I had guys pounding 400 grams of protein. You know, protein shake 3 times a day and this and chicken breast and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's no way I'm choking down 400 grams of protein. Because they were doing like 2 grams of protein per body weight or something. You know, they weigh 200 pounds. I figured 400 grams of protein. And this is not a high protein diet. This is a moderate protein diet. So that's another thing someone's going to throw in your face. It's going to beat your kidneys up. No, it's not. It's a moderate protein diet. And actually a healthy individual has no problem with any type of nitrogen balance. What's that? No, because you're not on a high protein diet. So back to what you were talking about setting this up. Usually under 50 grams of carbohydrate a day. 20 to 30% of your total calories from protein, the rest from fat. If your goal is to lose body fat, you figure out what let's say it's 2,000 calories a day that you're supposed to maintain your body weight. You take your deficit from the fat calories. So if it worked out to be, let's say, 20 grams of carbohydrate, 80 grams of protein, and then 100 grams of fat, I'm just using round numbers, you start taking away from fat calories. And what happens then is that your body starts using your body fat as the energy source. And if you end up being one of those people that chase ketones, that 0.5 to 5 millimolars is just a idea of where you need to be. Most people who are athletes end up in the 0.5 to 1 millimolars of beta-hydroxybutyrate, and that's because our muscle is usually metabolizing those ketones. You'll read about P-strips as far as testing for ketones. That works the first couple weeks. As soon as your body gets keto adapted and recognizing ketones as a fuel source, your body stops dumping them to urine or doesn't dump them as prevalently. So don't be like, I didn't change nothing, it ain't purple anymore. Sucks. No, don't do that, Breath meters. God, I love breath meters because to me that's a better indicator of metabolizing ketones because it's like your exhaust system. There's two really good ones out there. There's the ketonics and the level. I just got a level meter, and if you guys follow me on Facebook, I'm going to be going through the next few weeks on using the different types of meters because I'm also trying to, you guys remember that I talked about the glycemic index. I've started to establish what's called the ketogenic index, and I'm going to start testing people and doing test groups and foods on what foods or substrates yield more ketones at a blood level, urine level, and acetone level. And I'll make that a resource. That's more for people fighting metabolic diseases and other syndromes like cancers and type 1 diabetics and epileptics and stuff like that. Not necessarily for people chasing ketones, although the information will be helpful.
So if I understand it correctly, though, we want to get to the point where we're not excreting them, but rather using them as the fuel source. So
if your goal is, so that's why that happens. So people get hung up on chasing ketones in the beginning, and they start with the urine strips because they're dirt cheap. Right? You can go right to Walmart's right now in the diabetic section and grab 100 of them for like $6.95 or something like that. And in the beginning, it's good because your body will be dumping, like, hey, I got ketones, I'm dumping them, and all of a sudden it starts dwindling back off after you get keto adapted, and you get pissed and you throw them out, and then you go drinking with her. But don't get discouraged. That just falls off over time. Blood level ketones is the most consistent, but I don't think is gospel because it's easy. You prick a finger, hit it in the meter, just like blood glucose level, and you see what your blood level ketones are. Does that mean anything necessarily? For type 1 diabetics, it keeps you out of ketoacidosis. Does it mean anything if you get 0.5 to 0.1 and she's completely rocking 4s and 5s all the time? No, that's completely dependent on your metabolism. It doesn't make her any better than you.
So what do I need to watch for? What is the number you watch for?
25 to 50 is when you think you're in ketoacidosis as far as millimolars of...
So what is the goal that I should be? And this isn't a blood meter test.
The blood meter test. It's for beta-hydroxybutyrate at a blood level. Anywhere from 0.5 to 5 is where Finney and Volek kind of threw their footprint as being in nutritional ketosis. Anything above, they say, is maybe like a starvation ketosis, like 5 to 8 to 10. Usually I only find really high ketone levels with people that are substantially overweight. That's just been my personal experience. I don't have any real science behind that one. No, go ahead.
Do you, or how do you manage how lean you get?
Fat.
Because there
You-
are certain people in my life that do not like too lean of a look.
Fat will become your new energy source. And fat will be the lever, and that's a Ketogains thing, that you can use to gain or lose weight. So in 2014, I set out to gain weight on a ketogenic diet. And you can get keto fat. We all did it at my gym over the holidays. So you can...
And it keeps you soft versus the sinewy
Yes,
that you were
the sinewy look. Yeah, and it's very hard to... Well, for most people, it's very hard to get to that point. I have a gym full of people that wish they had that sinewy look and we're trying to bulk back up. At no point in here did anyone have a hard time getting fat.
Well, what I'm saying, if you eat carbs, of course. But
Yeah.
if you're really
No, you can use fat, and what...
keto, but then you start to get complaints because
Yeah.
you're all sinewy and
No, you just
like a snake. Well, then
it's harder. I think it's harder to get fat in ketosis because of the insulin response. But you can. You just overeat. Or like I said, we had a ton of keto treats in my gym over the holidays. And in that same regard, I upped my diet, did my diet exactly the same in 2014, but added 1 extra whole can of coconut milk a day, and I was able to put on weight
so you
too.
do not vary your carbs. I guess that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, no, I don't touch those. Those stayed the same. My protein and carbohydrates stayed the same, and I upped my fat via a can of coconut milk.
Okay, because he recommends, there's I think it's under 65 grams of carbs for weight loss, and then once you reach your goal, then you stay under 100 or 150, depending on what your calories.
The only thing that I would argue with getting close to that 100 point is you might find yourself teetering in and out of nutritional ketosis, and you may feel like shit.
Okay, so
Stephen, yeah, they put that in their book. It's like if you kind of going to Hawaii, you fall into the middle of the ocean, that's exactly what it is. If you stay, bodybuilders do that all the time. That's bodybuilders' MO. Don't get me wrong. You can do this. You can lose fat on a high-carb diet. Bodybuilders do it all the time. They get up in the morning, they have that chicken breast with that big whole thing of brown rice that they choke down, and then get on a step mill for 2 hours. And then at the end of the day, they're foggy and feel like shit because they're bonking. And then they go to bed and they get themselves back out of ketosis at the end of the day. They do that big carb load, or they do a fasted cardio in the morning, and then have chicken breast and that big thing of rice or Ezekiel bread or whatever they want to do. And then they go back on the step mill for 2 hours. I can't argue that that doesn't work because there's a whole lot of bodybuilders who have been doing that for generations. But it sucks. Anyone who's gone down that route, the dry old chicken breast and the half a cup of rice or whatever, just to constantly feel like crap in the middle and constantly be starving. That's another thing that once you switch over to keto adapted, your leptin levels come down and your hunger hormones come down. You don't get as ravenous. That all kind of resets, which is really nice.
What is the highest you would go with carbs without floating that line?
I would maybe 50.
50 at the highest.
Yeah, and then again, that's going to be individualized. I can't say that if you don't run 13 miles a day that 100 isn't fine for you, right? Because I'm not in that game, and because that's a lot of you burn through that. You can burn through your 2,000 kilocalories on a runner pretty dang quick. Peter Defty or Duffy works with the Vespa group. He works with a lot of long distance runners and ketogenic diets, and I mean long distance, I mean ultras runners. People run ultras and stuff like that, and I think he has them at the 100 to 125. But that's a different...
They're still in.
Yeah, oh yeah, because these guys are, a short run for these guys, this could be 20 miles,
Probably even how many calories a day.
Yeah, exactly. But they perform way better because of that respiratory coefficient and producing less CO2, less, lactate, less, pH, their pH doesn't get as low. They perform way better. They're breaking all kinds of records running ultras and stuff like that because they start the race without ever having to bonk. It's a huge advantage. Ready, set, go. You're already in fat burning mode, you know, and you have been. You know, the other thing is another mentality that I had to get over is people doing short stints and then kicking over their own sandcastle. You guys ever built the best sandcastle at the beach and then kick over your own sandcastle? And a lot of times that's what people do. That's what I use my old mentality from powerlifting. I'm going to put myself on the cleanest, healthiest diets, ask my body to perform at its ultimate best, PR on every single thing, and then reward it by kicking the shit out of it with Jägermeister and cake. If you were that employee, you would quit. How about a couple of days of recovery, doc? You know, how about some vitamins? Replenish some of these fluids. Give me some vitamins and some protein. I just squatted 600 pounds, you know, and you're sore. Let's kill you. If you were a worker for that guy, you'd quit, right? You know, that's 2 days, the last powerlifting meet when I was just regular paleo, I did like 2 days of fruit and lean meats and stuff like that. Because it made sense, right? You physically beat the shit out of yourself for 12 weeks and then end it with chemotherapy and... But that's the mentality. What are you doing after the race? And hammered. Yeah, you just asked the most you've ever asked of your body in your whole life. And you're going to hand it a pile of shit. Here you go, thanks.
That's so common. You know, it's so common in the CrossFit world, too.
Oh, we call it, we wrote a blog post a few years back called Take That Body. You know, because that's exactly what you're doing. Hey, I'm asking the most of you for 12 weeks. We're going to train like a beast for 12 weeks. And the day that I get the absolute best physical performance out of you, I'm going to hand you a pile of shit. It makes no sense at all. No sense at all. Have a donut. Why? How about some vegetables, please? Think of it from that perspective, and the next time you can be like, yeah, maybe we'll party next weekend. Yeah. It should be. You should. I mean, if you should your body should get the Christmas bonus at that point. You should have a vitamin, something at the end, and you know what I'm saying? Like what's the most bioavailable protein you can find at the end of that race? Not vodka. You know.
Vitamin infused vodka.
You know.
That's what we should come up with.
4 or 5
Yeah, this will be. 50-50. Meet me halfway. All right. Any other questions?
Just before you leave, there was one of the girls who had to leave. There was a cholesterol slide that had some testing.
Yeah.
Could you put that up so I can take a picture of it for me?
Yeah, or I can post it underneath the event when we.
Thanks. She was really interested in that.
Here it is.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I just have one last question.
Yeah.
It's more personal for you. Your kids.
Tough. Okay, tough.
Yeah.
Because it involves packing lunches, breakfasts, stuff like that. So my son is 12 now, my daughter is 9. My daughter started out as a very picky eater, and she actually eats pretty good. She does eat lunch meats and stuff like that, and then applesauces and sugar-free applesauces, nothing added and stuff like that. My son would come in and out, but now that he's 12, I lead more by example, and I explain things to him. And he's leaning more towards my style of eating now than he ever has. He understands low carb. He looks around now and he sees how overweight a lot of people are, and he asks me why. And I said, I can't tell you 100% why, but I have a good idea that it's because of the food choices they make. You know, and now, as a matter of fact, last night we posted, his home ec teacher offered a low-carb recipe. We made zucchini boats that had cheese and but instead of like a French pizza bread, it was a zucchini with some pepperoni and mushrooms and a little bit of cheese and an organic sauce that we put on it. And I had him make them. He made them. He goes, I want to make this. All right, well, come on, let's go to the grocery store together. Let's find these things. This is a healthy choice. Dad, I want a Pop-Tart. I'll give you a Pop-Tart on treat day, but I got to let you know that's the absolute worst decision you could be making right now for your body. So it's up to you. Like I said,
Still let him make the decision, but
on treat day, it's pretty much. I'm a parent first through the week where I can. I'm gone a lot running the gym and working, so a lot of times convenience does kick in there. Like if my mom's got to pick them up from the bus stop, I said, Mom, just take them to McDonald's, get them something to eat, blah, blah, blah. which is horrible. But, like I said, my son knows that he never drinks pop anymore. He's always water. They make good choices where they can, and their kids where they can too.
You're just instilling the knowledge.
Yeah, for later. And then a lot of times I just put my foot down and say, no, we're not having shit tonight. You're going to have... And like
a big family meal that is gonna, we have a lot of children.
Well, I'll fill the grill. I'll fill the grill with meat, and there'd be a vegetable out there and whatever, They're finding they really like broccoli if I, salt it up, flake salt. You guys have tried flake salt or sea salt, flake salt? That stuff is unbelievable. I got that on KetoDaddy.com. You won't, the other white stuff at the table at the restaurant anymore, you will even dismiss as even bean salt. Just try to keep healthy choices on the table. There's very limited chips and pretzels in my house. I currently do have like a different kinds of nuts, like walnuts, pecans, and some cashews. I get them used to grabbing that. They tend not to overeat that stuff. Broccoli, kids have a hard time overeating broccoli. I recently found flounder, a really good flounder I like. I make it with coconut oil in a pan. My son loves it. And we found cauliflower cauliflower rice steamables. He loves those too. So you can make it taste good if you get good with your spices and stuff. It is a challenge. In this day, and you don't want to alienate them either. You don't want to be that guy that sends them to lunch with a stainless steel lunchbox and all organic and sit at the... You know what I'm saying? And my son's in middle school, and that's demanding enough as it is. There's a lot of social pressure there. You don't want them not to know what McDonald's is or whatever.
They realize it's unhealthy, and they crave healthy foods too. They're like, we offered them on the way home from movie. My mom last night really goes, "Hey, you guys, I was pushing at 30. Where do you want to stop and get something to eat?" And they were like, "No, it's okay. We'll wait a couple of them. We'll wait. We'd rather wait to get home."
Yeah.
My kids choose not. My kids won't eat lunch at school. They pack their own lunch every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
My oldest daughter, she cooks a lot of good meals. We eat a lot of it. So.
Yeah. No, it's
You don't
just...
give it to them, and then when they do have it, and they get the stomachache after.
That's a big one. You get that conditioned response. So I feel like crap. Yeah, because you ate like crap. My son, one treat night, wanted a brownie, and he had a brownie like right before he went to bed, and ended up waking up at 2 a.m. throwing the thing up. That kid will never eat a brownie again. So. All right. Anything else?
You said you would give us personal help
Just shoot me an email with the. If you have a hard time with the BMR thing, let me know. It does take me 2 seconds to do that.
I can figure out how many calories you should eat.
Okay. The basal metabolic rate calculator is a place to start. Let me stop this.